Hello and welcome to the Drexel Interview. I'm your host, Paula Morantz-Cohen, speaking to you from the Paul Peck Alumni Center at Drexel University. Today my guest is the writer Francine Prose. Prose is the author of numerous critically acclaimed novels, nonfiction works, young adult, and children's books. She's a past president of the PEN American Center, a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and the winner of a Guggenheim, a Fulbright, and many other awards. She's also a veteran teacher and has served on the faculty of creative writing programs across the country. This is the second part of a two-part interview. In the first part, we spoke about Francine Prose's books, with emphasis on her most recent novel, Lovers at the Chameleon Club, Paris, 1932. In this second part, we'll talk more generally about her formation as a writer, her taste in books, and her ideas about the teaching of literature and writing. Francine Prose, welcome back to the Drexel Interview.
Thank you.
I know you were a voracious reader as a child, and I wonder if you'd tell us about some of the books you read in your earliest years that you think may have influenced you in becoming a writer.
I just read everything I could find. I mean, I remember my aunt who lived with us read me Little Women when I was very little, and weeping when Beth died, and deciding which of them I would be like, and then what did I read? I read Pippi Longstocking. I liked a lot the original Empowered Little Girl, and fairy tales. I read a lot of fairy tales. I read Hans Christian Andersen, Grimm. Greek myths I especially liked, really anything I could find.
What do you think it is about certain children that makes them love books when others don't? Do you think it has anything to do with their position in the family, their sense of loneliness, their sense of social positioning? Do you have thoughts about that?
I don't know. I mean, I just like the ability to be in another world, I mean, somebody else's world, and just to be told a story to. I mean, I remember I had a kind of happy childhood. I mean, I had no desperate desire to escape. It wasn't like that. But I just, as soon as I figured out how to do it, I figured out that I liked doing it. So, and also, quite honestly, I got a lot of attention from the family because I was an early reader. It was sort of like a party trick.
I think that's often the case. Yeah. You get some stroking for it, and then that makes you want to do more of it.
But I see it now. I mean, my granddaughter, who's 7, has learned to read, and I look at the books that she gets in school, and the books that she has to read to progress through the levels that you have to get out of first grade or whatever, and they're not that interesting. I mean, they're not. She can read them, and the thing is, she's not stumped by them, so she feels successful when she gets from one to the other. But I was reading her Roald Dahl's The Witches over last weekend.
I love that book.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was the first time, I mean, it's terrifying. It's a terrifying book. I mean, it's unbelievably scary. And even reading it to her, I could tell I was scared, she was scared. But she totally loved it. And she was saying, I'd read like 4 chapters at once, and then she'd say, well, what happens next? It seemed to me that it was the first time that she ever understood that the curiosity to find out what happens next could come through a book. I mean, she watches a lot of TV, she watches movies, she has her little gadgets and so on. But this was the first time that basically she was frightened enough to want to know how it worked out. And it became clear to me that teachers maybe should realize that a little more, that kids are into narrative, and they're into suspense the way grown-ups are, and they're not, they're not completely going to be satisfied with a book that's called, Blah Blah's Birthday Party, where the big thing at issue is what Blah Blah's going to get for his birthday. Why do they care?
You went on to graduate school in English literature, obviously, because of your love of books, but then you dropped out before completing your PhD, and you've said that you didn't like the way graduate students and professors talked about books. Could you explain that?
Well, it was pretty joyless. I mean, it was very dry. It was pretty joyless, and also the thing that really finally turned me around. I was a medieval literature graduate student, and we had a famous professor, a Chaucer professor, and at that point, I don't know why this was. I don't know if it's still true or not, but there were a lot of nuns and priests who took medieval literature, who were studying medieval literature. So it was a Chaucer seminar, and we went around the room translating. And the professor, who was obviously a sadist, although it didn't occur to me until later, took a huge pleasure in getting the nuns to translate the really filthy parts of Chaucer. And then he would just sit there and smile. And I thought, you know, I'm sitting at this end of the table, and really, I don't want to be sitting at that end of the table. It's just not, it's not what I want. And it also seemed to me that there was very little passion for the subject matter among the professors. I mean, some did, some clearly did, but not that many.
Were you at the point where theory was becoming rampant?
No,
so that might have even turned you off more.
Yeah, well, I've never understood theory. I mean, you know, I have no idea what people were talking about. And also, it's always given me a kind of pleasure to say that I have no idea what people are talking about. So,
yeah, you just say, I don't
get it. Yeah.
Yet you have taught in creative writing programs throughout the country, and I think you have a sense of the division often that exists between the creative writing people and then the literature people, and the way, I mean, they may even teach the same books, but they teach them differently. So that I think is kind of interesting. But so you teach in creative writing courses, and I guess my question to you is, do you think that creative writing can be taught?
Well, I don't teach creative writing anymore, so I feel that I've been saved saved from that whole debate. I teach literature, and I teach it the way, you know, reading like a writer. I teach it the way a writer would teach literature. It's all close reading. We do, you know, line by line, sentence by sentence in class. I ask my students, why this word, why not another word, why a semicolon instead of period. And, you know, I warn them, this is just going to be the most tedious thing that ever happened to you in your entire life, but it isn't. It really isn't, and they get it. And by the middle of the semester, they've really learned to read in a way that they haven't before they come in the class, and it's very satisfying for that reason.
So that's what is meant by reading like a writer, reading with the idea that you might write someday, and how it is the writer created the sentence. Now, are these courses that you teach this way in creative writing programs?
No, it's in the language and literature.
Okay.
I mean, now, since I've been at Bard, it's just in the language and literature department.
Okay, and you don't want to teach creative writing anymore?
You know, I'll do it for a week at a time if there's some kind of program somewhere. I mean, I was in Toronto last fall, and I taught it for a week. But as a semester-long thing, or as a real job, no.
And why is that?
Why? Also, I mean, for one thing, I find myself by now completely over-identified with my students. I mean, you know, the idea of sitting there, and I don't know about other classes, but I know the rule often is that the student whose work is being discussed isn't allowed to speak. So the idea of being sitting there, essentially gagged while somebody talks about, I wouldn't do it for $1 million, honestly, but with my own work. So I don't feel that I have the right to ask students to do something that I wouldn't do.
Why is it that students are not allowed to speak while their work is being discussed?
Why? Do you have any idea?
No, I don't do it.
I don't know. It's really insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's supposed to be so that they can't say, but I meant, you know, but why can't they say what they meant? I mean, if we know what they meant, it might be easier to help them
do what they
want to do. Exactly. Yeah.
I agree with you, absolutely. In this book, each chapter deals with a different aspect of writing, and I particularly like your chapters on the sentence and the paragraph. And I would like you to read from first this section on the sentence, which is a little bit long, not too long, but it deals with your explanation of the beauty of a sentence, or how beautiful a sentence can be. And then you give an example of a beautiful sentence by Dr. Johnson, Samuel Johnson, which I love. So if you could read, starting here, through the Johnson example.
Okay.
Okay.
By now, you may be asking, what is a beautiful sentence? The answer is that beauty in a sentence is ultimately as difficult to quantify or describe as beauty in a painting or a human face. Perhaps a more accurate explanation might be something like Emily Dickinson's well-known definition of poetry. If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know this is poetry. I realize that this is not as precise a definition as the would-be beautiful sentence writer might wish. But perhaps it will offer some comfort if I say that if you're even thinking in these terms, that is, if you're even considering what might constitute strong, vigorous, energetic, and clear sentences, you are already far in advance of wherever you were before you were conscious of the sentence as something deserving our deep respect and enraptured attention. Among the many authors whose names crop up in this context are, to choose three, who are widely separated not only by century, but also by genre, gender, background, and temperament: Samuel Johnson, Virginia Woolf, and Philip Roth. Here is the sentence that begins Samuel Johnson's brief biography, The Life of Savage. It has been observed in all ages that the advantages of nature or of fortune have contributed very little to the promotion of happiness, and that those whom the splendor of their rank or the extent of their capacity have placed upon the summits of human life have not often given any just occasion to envy in those who look up to them from a lower station, whether it be that apparent superiority incites great designs, and great designs are naturally liable to fatal miscarriages, or that the general lot of mankind is misery, and the misfortunes of those whose eminence drew upon them a universal attention have been more carefully recorded because they were more generally observed and have in reality only been more conspicuous than others, not more frequent or more severe. It's extremely beautiful. Oh, so can I read, actually, I mean,
Yes.
my favorite sentence is here. It's the one, it's the Virginia Woolf sentence. You know,
Okay,
this one,
yeah.
it's 181 words long. I'll try and not make it last forever, but, you know, I mean, students who think you can't write a long sentence or you can't write a complex sentence, I mean, it's so beautiful. And in fact, you could say I kind of wrote the book to be able to put the sentence in it. So it's the beginning of Virginia Woolf's essay on being ill. And also, I mean, the other thing about it is you know, there's a little about the Johnson sentence that still has the ring of the archaic to it, whereas this is a completely modern sentence. It just happens to be 181 words long and instantly comprehensible. I mean, there's no way you can possibly be confused. All right, on being ill. Considering how common illness is, how tremendous the spiritual change that it brings, how astonishing when the lights of health go down, the undiscovered countries that are then disclosed, what wastes and deserts of the soul a slight attack of influenza brings to view, what precipices and lawns sprinkled with bright flowers a little rise of temperature reveals, what ancient and obdurate oaks are uprooted in us by the act of sickness, how we go down into the pit of death and feel the waters of annihilation close above our heads, and wake thinking to find ourselves in the presence of the angels and the harpers when we have a tooth out, and come to the service in the dentist's armchair and confuse his rinse the mouth, with the greeting of the deity stooping from the floor of heaven to welcome us. When we think of this, as we are so frequently forced to think of it, it becomes strange indeed that illness has not taken its place with love and battle and jealousy among the prime themes of literature.
Beautiful.
It doesn't get any better than that,
No.
really.
And such wit, such
Amazing.
cleverness, and such sinuousness. Going from, I guess, the sublime, it's not even sublime, from Woolf to Rex Stout. You have a chapter on the paragraph. Now, this was these two examples were from your chapter on the sentence, and then you also have a chapter on the paragraph, and in it you have a description of how Nero Wolfe, who is the detective in the Rex Stout detective novels, solves a mystery by analyzing how a particular writer uses paragraphing. And I just love this. And if you could start here and then read to here.
Read to the space break?
Yeah, to the, yeah.
You know, I should say before I read this that I wrote this book kind of like Tom Sawyer painting the fence. I mean, I emailed my writer friends and said, okay, what's your favorite paragraph? Who's your favorite sentence writer? So I owe the novelist and short story writer David Gates for this one, which I might not have found on my own. In one of Rex Stout's mysteries, Plot It Yourself, Nero Wolfe is called upon to determine if 3 manuscripts that figure in a case involving accusations of plagiarism could have been written by the same person. His conclusion that they're indeed by the same author is based on the telltale repetition of characteristic words and phrases such as "not for nothing." There are also similarities in punctuation. The writer shows a preference for semicolons instead of commas or dashes. But the most telling feature, the great detective claims, are the paragraphs. So here's the quote. A clever man might successfully disguise every element of a style but one, the paragraphing. Diction and syntax may be determined and controlled by rational processes in full consciousness, but paragraphing, the decision whether to take short hops or long ones, and whether to hop in the middle of a thought or action or finish it first, that comes from instinct, from the depths of personality. I will concede the possibility that the verbal similarities and even the punctuation could be coincidence, though it is highly improbable, but not the paragraphing. These 3 stories were paragraphed by the same person.
Great. I love the idea of the short hops or the hops, that as understanding paragraphs as hopping, but to make that the basis of solving a mystery, brilliant.
It's great.
Yeah. You have, in this book, you talk about many writers and give examples from many writers, and from that point of view, it's a wonderful book to read because I think it incites a reader to, or especially even a novice reader, to want to go out and read some of these books based on the paragraphs that you choose or the little excerpts that you choose. And among them, Woolf, Eliot, Austen, Kleist, Kafka, Flannery O'Connor, Nabokov, Philip Roth, many others. And even at the end of the book, you have a list of books to be read immediately, which I thought was kind of neat. But your penultimate chapter deals with Chekhov, who appears to be the first among equals, the writer that you most revere. Could you tell us what it is about Chekhov that you love?
Well, he was certainly the most compassionate of any writer ever, and also the most capable of getting inside the thoughts of people who are unlike himself. Old, young, male, female, rich, poor, it didn't matter. He seemed not to have a skin. He could just get into somebody else's skin. And in fact, the essay in the book is called Learning from Chekhov, and it's about really the worst year of my life. I was commuting to teach, and teaching writing. And it was the only time I've had an adversarial relationship with my class. I mean, they hated me, and I hated them right back. And I would tell them, and it was partly because everyone was so hostile, I would say, oh no, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, and I would, all these rules that I don't even believe in. And the exact same thing I would tell them. I mean, for example, I would say, you can't have a story in which the two main characters have the same name. And then I would get on the bus to go home, and I would read Chekhov's The Two Volodya's, in which, guess what? Or I would say, you can't write a story for obvious reasons in which the point of view character dies. And then I would read Gusev, which is one of the greatest Chekhov short stories, and he dies. So every stupid rule I had told them, I would read it was like a law of nature after a while. I knew that whatever I had said in class, I would read the Chekhov story that would just disprove what I had said. So it was a great education for me, and fortunately the year ended and I was still reading Chekhov.
So did that class, was that reading Chekhov taught you how to teach in some ways?
Well, it certainly taught me not to say anything definitive like that. I mean, I never, now I think you could probably do anything you want if you do it well enough. So, I would never say anymore, you can't do something.
Do you think, though, I guess I'm getting back to the issue of teaching and getting a feeling of antagonism in a class, which can happen, and whether you think that that happens. What's your thought? I mean, I can't imagine it was because you were laying down absolute rules that
wasn't
happened.
why it happened.
Yeah.
No, my students were very lazy, and it was irritating. And so, I was...
You got irritated.
So I got irritated. But no, there are things you can teach. You can teach line editing for sure. I did that. Last year, I think I had this fantastic experience. I went to Cartagena, Colombia, and the Garcia Marquez Foundation brings something like 40 young journalists from all over the world. And then brings a couple of writers, Spanish-speaking and American, English-speaking. And for 10 days, we would just teach them how to line edit, go over their work and say, yes, this word, not this word, compress the sentence, expand the sentence, just real nitty-gritty. And by the end of the 10 days, they were better writers. It was something that could be taught. So it wasn't like saying, you don't have good ideas, or you need to look someplace else, or you have the wrong sensibility, or any of the, or write the story from someone else's point of view, whatever. It was, their texts were the given, and then we just taught them how to make it better.
Do you think, given beautiful sentences that you read that students just don't, I don't know whether they don't have the discipline or it's not as important or valued in our culture to have that degree of precision and to care about a beautiful sentence?
I don't know. I mean, I think the problem may just be that it's never been pointed out to them. I mean, because my own experience is once you do and once they get it, they get it.
And they like it.
And they like it.
Yeah. About your writing, we've talked about your novels in the previous interview, but I'm wondering, Henry James said that he likes to get a germ from life and then take it away from life so that and then develop it imaginatively. And I wonder if you have the same sense. You get an idea for a novel, do you feel it can't be too close, or you can't have too much information about something that's real, or it will sort of kill the idea? Do you extract it quickly? What's your method in that sense?
Well, things often start from something very small. A story I overhear, a little experience I have. I mean, the one thing I can say for sure is that, it never starts from an idea. I mean, I don't really think that I have ideas. I don't, the meaning of evil. I mean, it starts from some little biographical detail or some story that someone tells me, and then it always kind of expands outward.
Do you have to, though, not know too much about what happened in the sense of taking it out of the actual circumstance, or does that not matter to you?
It doesn't really matter, and I never know that much, so, and I just have to invent the rest.
Okay. Has there been I use the word idea, but a scene or a germ that you wanted to develop that you couldn't quite make work and that you might go back to?
Well, Blue Angel, the novel that Angela Argo, the young writer, is writing, was actually a novel that I'd started about 5 years before.
Eggs?
Eggs, eggs. And it was just so terrible. I mean, it just seemed like something a 22-year-old would write. And I thought, I can't do this. It seems like something a 22-year-old would write. And then when I started writing Blue Angel and I needed something that a reasonably talented 22-year-old would write, I had it. So I would just extract big sections of it and put it into the other novel.
That's interesting. I was very struck by those pieces, and I wondered where you got them from. So they were part of a novel that you had written before. Huh. And do you feel, going back to that novel, do you think that the instructor had reason to be so enamored of that writing?
Well, it's better than a lot of what I see, or I used to see in writing classes, don't you think? I mean,
yes, it was good, but he was very, very taken.
Well, he was looking to destroy his life. There was something else going on besides her writing. I mean, it had more to do with what he wasn't doing than what she was doing. You
have written a lot of books, and I wonder if you ever go back and read any of them. Some writers will never go back to their past books. Do you do that periodically and see your past self?
No, in fact, I've gotten into certain amounts of trouble because I can't remember things. I mean, they made a musical out of my second novel, The Glorious Ones, and they made this fabulous musical. It was at Lincoln Center. And the woman, Lynn Ahrens, who was writing the book and the lyrics, kept saying, I've changed this, I'm not going to change that, I'm using this, and I kept saying, fine, fine. And the book came out in 1974, the musical was like 35 years later. And finally she said to me, you have no idea what happened in that book. And I went, no, I'm not going to, it's the last thing I'm going to do is sit and reread it.
Well, I wonder, because you write so much, is there a writing compulsion there? Do you feel that there is? I mean, I don't want to use the word neurotic in too strong
oh, for sure.
a sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a hugely neurotic compulsion. I'm not serious. I'm not.
From early years. And what is it that you're trying to do? I mean, I don't want to psychoanalyze you here.
It's to be graphomania. I just like putting words down on a page or a screen. I just like it.
Do you ever feel that you would like to stop writing for a while so that, I know writers sometimes feel that writing mediates life for them. And I wonder if you ever felt, well, I'd like to stop writing and just experience. Or has that ever...
What would I do? I mean, I don't...
just live.
I live. I mean, I have a life. I have a family. I go places. I'm not, I'm not always thinking, gee, I wonder if this would work as a story.
You're not?
No.
You're not thinking this is good grist for...
No. I mean, it's, you know, sometimes if I'm writing a travel article, I'll be wandering around desperately trying to think of a lead sentence. I mean, I used to write a lot about art shows. I was an art critic of sorts. And I'm very glad I'm not doing that anymore, because it kind of leached the pleasure out of it. Because I would go to a show, you know, in a place like this, and I'd be wandering around thinking, what's my lead sentence? So now I can just look at the art and be very happy and not have to worry about it.
Yeah. We're almost out of time, but I wonder if you could tell us, is there anything that you haven't written or that you'd like to write that you haven't yet addressed, some big topic or some genre?
Well, I'd like to write something as good as War and Peace, or Anna Karenina. I mean, there's always that, but I don't know what it is.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, because we're out of time, and it's been a wonderful, very far-ranging and rich discussion.
Thank you,
Francine
Paul.
Prose.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today at the Drexel Interview.